Serpent power. The snake is very similar to the human being in terms of movement and character. In fact, the snake is not a physical being as such, but a force of energy. The Kundalini, which is transmitted through the spine towards the higher centres, must be used wisely. Practice stillness and inner silence, like the snake who is compelled to wait and sit still, his consciousness transcending any physical discomfort he might be experiencing, as well as agitation. Otherwise, this energy injures the user, like the individual who grips the sword the wrong way round. The venom turns on the individual. As many people will have heard, the systems of martial arts, as well as systems of yoga and other spiritual systems, make constant reference to the snake. Now, the snake is not understood to be just a physical entity, but is actually a form of energy which takes the shape of a serpent and style of a serpent. So, for instance, in Kung Fu systems, in martial arts, as well as other systems, there is a so-called snake-style Kung Fu. Now, that's not so much a physical set of movements, but more of a dynamic quality of sinuous and snake-like movements. So, for instance, certain postures of the spine where you're kept upright and slightly snake-like in terms of where your neck is extended and curvature of the spine is maintained and natural. There is a natural curvature of the spine, which is the same kind of energy that the snake, cobra or serpent would demonstrate as it stands ready to snap outwards when threatened or attempting to defend itself. The yoga systems call this the Kundalini force, which makes its way up the spine when certain postures are conducive to that movement upwards. Upright postures where the neck is aligned with the thoracic spine, the mid-spine and the lower spine, to allow maximum transmission of this energy. So this is a very ancient practice which carries on today in new forms. So, for instance, you could have a snake-style Kung Fu which is organised around punching, kicking or throwing. It doesn't have to be around the typical Chinese Kung Fu. It's a mentality and a state that you're in. So the snake was copied in an attempt to pick up this energy. It was studied, it was watched, it was observed for long periods of time before there was such instruction possible. Before there was instruction made possible via videotapes and other mediums, which we're all familiar with now, it was necessary to learn these things from nature and to be absorbed in a state of nature that was that allowed the individual to pick these things up fairly easily and readily, provided they gave the sufficient energy and time. So that's the meaning behind the snake systems and practices. The ears. The ears are important in martial arts. The ears converge at the centre and are responsible for balance. The ears are passive and yet capable of dynamic and intense work. They're able to hear the stillness of silence, of intense vibrations of energy. Swordsmen in the past would blindfold themselves sometimes just to listen to the inner voice of silence. If you relax the gaze or close your eyes and just think about listening, nothing else, and then the mind becomes still and empty. This will initiate activity of the Vishuddhi chakra, as it's known in the Indian systems, which is located in the throat, the seat of wisdom of the third ear. What is the third ear? It's the ear that is situated in the throat that hears the internal sounds. These pick up external vibrations and at a certain frequency transmit them as sounds such as voice or any other kind. The throat, for example, can pick up the vibrations of the hara center, which is in the abdomen, the pit of the stomach, the center of the earth, from which great energies can be derived and transmitted to the upper centers of the brain, namely the heart center and especially the neck centers. The neck center in the Chinese systems is known as the door of muteness, which means an area that picks up sound when there's no external sound being made. So if one can remain still and silent, they can hear this voice of silence and enter the door of muteness through which nothing else can be carried. This is how silence is understood in the ancient Eastern systems, that it's a sense of energy that you can pick up, learn to pick up by absorbing yourself in silence and especially stillness, which is to say the same kind of thing. So this silence is picked up at the level of the neck centers, here, and to assist with this towards the brain, the tongue, which is known as the, if I get this correct, I believe it's known as the 12-storied pagoda, which obviously sits straight up and transmits this vibrationary force to the pituitary gland, which is at the level of the third eye, at the eyebrow center. So there's a certain intelligence that can be transmitted to the brain from a state of silence, which is to do with listening. Now obviously outward sounds can be conducive to harmony, inner harmony, and a sense of calm, which is necessary for silence and inner listening. So it's possible to learn these states just by practicing silence, stillness, and balance, which is also to do with the ears. Balance, as we know, the ears contain a fluid, and there's an inner spirit level within that, if you sense this balance, can transmit the same state of emotional and psychological and spiritual balance. Concentration. Concentration, the perception that effort and work are important factors, the main factors, should be switched on completely. This is known as seeing without eyes. Above all, conscious awareness should penetrate the activity so that there is no time for unimportant thoughts. Total devotion to an activity, the centre, should be maintained. Only by emptying oneself of the non-essential is it possible to fill oneself with life. To experience intense life is the goal, the one thought to concentrate on, around which every other possibility will present itself. Life is the goal in the cultivation of energy, rather than derivatives of life being concentrated on as a centre. It's alright to concentrate on peripheral matters in order to derive motivation and connection, but to entangle yourself with these externalities isn't the path to the centre, the straight path. It's the crooked path, which if you stray too much from and stop and smell the roses instead of heading forwards and keeping straight, can distract you from the centre. So life is the goal, concentration is the means. There's two types of concentration. An effortful concentration of the brain, which the brain uses to hold on to something, which can be a good start, but also can be exhausting. So there's a concentration with effort and without effort. As I said just now, it's possible to listen inwardly to nothing at all, just to listen without object. This doesn't take energy, it just cultivates energy. So with this in mind, to concentrate on muteness, silence, nothingness, it's possible to derive great energy and maximum contact with life in its most intense form, rather than the manifestations of life lower down the river. If you go to the source of the river, you will be drinking from the same water that's at the bottom and that's dispersed into the tributary swamps and smaller streams. It's the same water, but you can't be in the same place physically at the same time. It's preferable to, given the choice, be at the source where the nourishment of the atmosphere has created a fresh source of water, and to stay at this point you are at the source rather than the periphery. You're at the centre rather than the outside, the external. From this centre you incorporate the elements further down, the offshoots, but you're at the vital, most important, central point. So this is an analogy, for staying at the source and using this source as a source of energy.